Hey, welcome back to Bandwagon fans. This is Jeff, and tonight I am joined by
Scott?
and we are going to be talking about the movie JoJo Rabbit. Now, before we talk about actually getting into the movie, so I just want to do a couple notes about where I've been for the last few months. Just
Underwater.
yeah, largely
Yeah.
underwater. So I started my underwater photography business, JJ Snyder Photography. If you're in the Tucson area, you can get your portraits done in a 25,000-gallon pool. It's actually pretty exciting stuff.
It's very cool.
Yeah.
Too. The images are amazing.
And as we're talking about this, I might actually have a couple images playing over what we're
You should
saying.
do that. Yeah, because actually I think it might be something that would be hard for people to like have in
visualize,
their head
yeah.
until they actually see it.
So
But it's really a different thing.
Yeah. So there you are actually now watching the photos we were talking about that I will be adding to this video. So that's one of the big things I've been working on. The other big project that we've started, this is with me, Scott, and another friend of the show, Renee Bibby, who you've seen on several episodes. We have started a podcast. It's called What the What?
What the what?
And we talk about media and culture. You can find us on pretty much anywhere. We have 2 episodes up so far. You can find us on pretty much anywhere where you listen to your podcast.
iTunes is holding out on us a little bit, but it's just we need to probably get the 3rd episode up, and then iTunes will take everything whole cloth. But we have 10 episodes in the can, we've got a bunch coming. We're just not releasing them all at once.
Come out every Friday. I know they are on Spotify right now. And you can subscribe to us on, is it Anchor FM?
Yeah, there's a podcast platform called Anchor, and you can find us on Anchor.
Yeah. So we first episode where we talked about Joker and The Hustlers and what those 2 movies had to do with each other, which was kind
crazy when you think about it, but actually more than you think,
more than you might realize at first.
Less than you might imagine.
And then we also did an episode where we talked about the male within the male gaze,
which Renee jumped us with that one.
Yeah, that was a one-time thing where Scott and I did not know the topic walking in. Renee did not tell us the topic literally until after we hit record, and it was pretty interesting. And it was also right up my alley, so I was able to roll with it. So that's the podcast. And then in your life, some pretty exciting things.
We've been really busy. Lots of great projects, lots of great clients. I think since the last time I was on Bandwagon Fans, we actually bought the studio where you had recorded remotely a couple Bandwagon Fans episodes in our studio, and my wife Anna, who's my producer for the photography and video work that I do, she and I purchased the building, which we're really excited about. And so it looks a little different than it did when we were in there, but we now live there. It's an 80-year-old Adobe house, essentially. It was a Chinese market at one time, and it's had a whole bunch of lives, and it's really it's a great place. We're really excited.
It was a furniture factory at one point.
Custom furniture,
an art gallery.
Carvers. And actually had been an art gallery in my memory, an art gallery I'd actually been into at some point.
So pretty exciting stuff. So
so
we're both of us keep pretty busy. But I don't know. So I did have to stop and start this recording twice. So I don't know if I mentioned that 2019 has just been absolutely terrible for movies.
Yeah, you loved all the movies in 2019, didn't you?
It's funny. It's funny when I go to Walmart and I see the new release DVD aisle. I'm like, crap. JoJo Rabbit, however, was not crap.
We should probably have a conversation sometime about why 2019 was so bad. And there are a lot of people out there who wouldn't agree with us. There are a lot of people who think that there were really good movies in 2019, but I think that there were maybe some forces behind the really terrible stuff that we saw.
Yes. I would disagree with. I think most people, anybody there's always a few good movies that come out. But overwhelmingly, the consensus that I've seen is that 2019 has been exceptionally bad.
A bit of a desert.
It's been rough.
Yeah.
2 movies that I watched that broke me where I didn't review them: Pet Sematary and Dumbo. Saw them in the same week, and that I was just done.
He was a broken man.
Yeah.
After those movies.
I was done. Movies. Even Endgame couldn't salvage my will to talk about these movies. However, JoJo Rabbit did.
Yay, JoJo Rabbit.
So, just a quick synopsis on the movie. And this is a discussion. It's not a review. We are going to spoil the hell out of it from day one. So if you have not seen it, go see it. Go support this movie. So this is a movie about a 10-year-old boy during World War II. He's a member of the Hitler Youth Brigade or Hitler Youth Movement. Um, and he has an imaginary friend who actually is Adolf Hitler, played by the director Taika Waititi.
And that's enough to scare anybody away from the movie.
Yeah, that's a
right
third
there.
rail. That's a third rail that really, maybe a better way of saying, a bridge too far for some people. It's too much for some people, and we'll probably touch on that here in a minute.
Oh, I don't think we could possibly talk about this movie with not.
Right. So and then so he's a fanatical young Nazi, really, worships Adolf Hitler, and then comes to find out that his mom is hiding a young Jewish girl in a crawl space in their house, and is actually a member of the resistance to the Nazi regime. And that is basically that's the synopsis of the movie. Just overall thoughts and impressions, Scott.
I loved it. Probably the best movie of 2019 by a long shot for me. Like really by a long shot. And for me, and this is not necessarily going to resonate with everybody because people come to movies for different things, but for me, it was a perfect movie, and it was a perfect movie on the level that through the entire movie, nothing took me out of it. There was no moment that I felt like, that was really the wrong thing to do, and also that it didn't manipulate the audience. I felt like it really it presented a story, oddly enough, in a very sort of innocent kind of way, even with these topics that are really, really like problematic topics. And at the end of the movie, there's a resolution to it, and you get it. It sort of exists. It wraps up, and really the acting from this 10-year-old kid is like brilliant.
Yeah, let me grab his name real quick. Roman Griffin Davis.
Yeah, really like he ought to be up for Best Actor.
He should be up for it.
At 10 years old. I don't know how old he is in real life, but
yeah, he should be up for Best Actor. He should win Best Actor. Yeah. I have not seen anything this year that comes close to what he did.
And he carries the movie. I mean, he is probably on screen for at least 60, 70, 80% of the time in this movie, and has to carry a lot of like really different. He has to carry a relationship with his mother, who's Scarlett Johansson. He has to carry a relationship with his imaginary friend Adolf Hitler, who is also the director of the movie. And he has to carry a relationship with this kid who's just kind of a friend, like you and I are friends. He has this really nice relationship with this kid who's a friend of his, and he has to carry a relationship with this Jewish girl, Yorkie.
I loved Yorkie.
Yeah, he was great. And so he has 4 like really different relationships. They all develop during the course of the movie. He does a great job developing them. Yeah. It is just like really astounding that a 10-year-old could pull that off.
And yeah, and I second everything you said. This is by far and away my favorite movie of the year. One of my favorite movies of all time, really. Just not to be a prisoner of the moment, but if you put a gun to my head, I would probably say this is in my top 10 easily. And not just like within individual scenes, he had to convey such a wide range of emotions, from fear to anger to love,
lust.
10-year-old
lust. Yeah, that version of lust.
And he handled every one of those emotions.
Right. Like
there was not a false moment in that there wasn't a false moment from any actor at any point in the movie. Some of the other actors, Scarlett Johansson played his mother. Let's see what her name is. Thomasin McKenzie played Elsa, the Jewish girl with the wall.
Quite good.
Yeah,
really quite good. Much really a strong female character, like really strong female character, but subdued by circumstances. So there are times when she's very quiet and withdrawn, but there are times when she really shines. And I think in both of those situations, as an actress, she really shines.
Yeah. And I know I said we're not doing a straight movie review, just like this movie deserves its accolades, and I want to make sure everybody gets, I've heard some people complain about Rebel Wilson. I thought she was really funny in it. I think it's actually one of the best performances I've seen her in.
And she stood in for a kind of person and in some ways you sort of needed her every now and then to be the, the Nazi that believes that,
the true believer.
Yeah, that Russians eat their babies, or Russians eat German babies, and like really believe it.
Yeah. So I'm gonna put a pin in that, because we're gonna come back to it in about 30 seconds. Just a couple other actors I just want to acknowledge. Archie Yates played Yorkie.
Yeah, he's great.
God, I love that kid.
Yeah,
he was so great. We mentioned Taika Waititi actually played Adolf Hitler.
Right.
And at some point I want to talk about his performance, because it was the screenplay for that character and how he performed it was brilliant.
Yes.
And then Sam Rockwell was great as this German captain who pops up throughout the movie. So,
and the Gestapo guy who was who is an idiot abroad. He's in a lot of like interesting things. So
what do you?
Have you ever seen an idiot abroad?
No.
Yeah.
But I think Brian Caspi. Yeah, he was terrifying. He was terrifying. Are you talking about the guy that came to
yes, big tall.
Yeah, he was terrifying.
Yeah.
Every performance in this movie was just absolutely phenomenal. How would you describe the overall theme of the movie? What was the message? What was the thesis of this movie?
You and I talked a little bit, so you actually kind of helped me form my opinion of it to some degree. I mean, I consider it to be, it's an anti-war film, and an oddly enough, sort of an anti-intolerance film. I guess that's not really that odd given the circumstances. But well, I'm going to give you credit for this, because I've thought about it a lot late since we had the conversation, and you had pointed out that it's really also a piece about how easy it is to be manipulated into believing things about people who aren't like you.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of that in this movie, and so I think that that's a real strong theme. But it really defies. It's not a buddy movie. It's not a war movie. It would really be very difficult to categorize this movie. It's
almost, so from my perspective, it's almost a video essay. When we were talking the other night, as we after the movie, I kind of think that the thesis is monsters aren't born; they're manufactured, and they can be manufactured anywhere. And that theme plays out in every single scene in the movie. So you have a little boy, and they often talk about how is this boy who can barely tie his shoes, and is such a klutz, is so clumsy. How could he be such a monster? But he's not really a monster. He's just a little boy who wants to fit in and belong.
But it has a moment of monstrosity when he doesn't tell the girl who's captive in their house that the war is over.
Yeah. So but that's the push and pull throughout the entire movie is which track is he going to go on? Is he gonna be that innocent little boy that just wants to be loved and wants to be wants to be part of everybody, or is he going to buy into the Nazi ideology? And it throughout the movie. And so I mentioned earlier about Taika Waititi's performance. So because the Adolf character it's not actually Hitler, it's his imaginary friend. It's kind of a stand-in for that internal conflict. So at the beginning of the movie, Adolf is portrayed as whimsical and funny, and as it progresses, as the cognitive dissonance builds up, the Adolf character starts becoming more violent, more threatening, more lashing out. He actually starts becoming fear because he realizes that part of his psyche. Sorry, the pronoun game gets tricky when in this context. Right. So that part of the kid's psyche that Adolf represents is being pushed out as the Ilsa part of the psyche comes in. So the Adolf psyche starts lashing out,
and it is totally cognitive dissonance because what he's learning in his relationship with this girl, and in some things that he's starting to see with his mother that he doesn't entirely understand, is that the sort of simplistic party line, the Nazi line that he's being fed, might not be accurate. But he really doesn't have anything that he can do with that, because that has been his motivation for, you get the sense, the first 10 years of his life, as much as he could be thinking about this stuff, he's been steeped in that.
Yeah. There's another theme that comes out constantly throughout the movie, and that's the difference between somebody's outer self and their inner self. Was there anything along those lines? This is something we haven't actually talked about before. Was there anything that stood out in your mind on that?
Scarlett Johansson's performance, they were really interesting and nuanced performance, in that, here she is, she's playing somebody who's a member of the German resistance to the Nazis, and with her son, who she clearly loves, she doesn't support Nazi doctrine with him, but she plays along, essentially. And I think the reason that she plays along is that she understands that this is something that is born in a 10-year-old head. When she's in having a conversation with the young woman who is hiding in the house,
Elsa.
Yeah, Elsa. There's a very different side of the mother that you see, and really the pain that she feels that her son feels this way, and the real sort of, it's almost her cognitive dissonance moment, that she has to live in this other world, where clearly in the town she is respected somewhat as being sort of a stalwart and upstanding Nazi. Yeah. And for several of the people, when they have to kind of actually chew on that, when something comes up where they have to sort of profess, it's difficult for them. And it's interesting to see that, and it's well acted.
On that note, there was one scene in particular, and you mentioned earlier, when the Gestapo shows up, and so what we don't know is that they've either already taken custody of the mother of Scarlett Johansson, or they're about to. But they're in this kid's house, ransacking things, and they're just on the verge of discovering that Elsa is staying there. And then she actually comes out, and this should be about 17-year-old Jewish girl has to Heil Hitler 5 just Gestapo guys, and it's one of them. It's the most terrifying scene. There's actually
painful. I mean, it's really difficult to watch.
There's 2 scenes in the movie that are shot as a horror scene. This is one of them, and it's actually horrific. The tension, it's just everybody's just on the edge of their seats, because they're like, please fall for it.
Yeah, there's this and it's funny, because like a horror movie, it begins with comedy, because it begins with 5 Gestapo agents and this sort of round of Heil Hitlers between the boy and each one of the Gestapo agents. 2 German officers show up, and we don't quite know what their place in this is. They Heil Hitler everybody Heil Hitlers them, and it's uncomfortably funny in a way, and it's not like a kind of laugh at it sort of funny. I don't think anybody in the theater laughed, but it is sort of a funny situation. And then you get what he's leading up to, and that's that the girl is going to be forced to do this as well.
Yeah, so let's rewind a little bit and go back to the theme of the outer self versus the inner self. And the movie itself is actually, overall, the movie does that. It kind of presents itself as a comedy, but there's a horror movie that comedy is disguising a horror movie. Right. It's disguising some incredibly tragic, deeply tragic things that happen.
It's not really that funny.
Yeah.
I mean, there's very little Hitler eating a unicorn head, that sort of played for visual laughs, but it's not really, I don't think it's a comedy that's played for laugh out loud laughs. And there were a few things that we laughed about.
So the second time I saw it, when I saw it twice, the second time was with Renee and some of her family, that crowd was laughing all the way to the end of the movie. Every beat that was supposed to be laughed at, they laughed at. But you're right. It's one of those movies where you're laughing. It's like, oh shit, that just got real fast. So it's kind of that tension between its outward appearance and then what its core is. And then at the very end, it ends on an incredibly uplifting. So even despite this horror, and it probably goes back to why it was presented as a comedy in the first place. So throughout this horror, there's still hope. There's still something to live for, and a reason to dance.
There's a circularity too, because the beginning of the movie, like the very beginning of the movie, the sort of opening scene, I can't remember if it's credits or not, but just this opening scene is just this salvo of sort of old Nazi propaganda newsreel stuff with the German version of I Want to Hold Your Hand playing. And people and like kids, young women, young boys sort of marching, but also rushing and being and acting towards Hitler like kids acted towards the Beatles.
I was wondering if you were going to remember that, because I picked up on that more on the second viewing, and I was like, oh yeah, it's definitely like it's a pretty clear juxtaposition between the fanaticism of a Beatles fan versus the fanaticism of Hitler Youth.
And then the final scene with I mean, do you want to say more about it, because you brought it up, like why they're dancing?
Oh no, go ahead.
So at the very end of the film, like literally kind of the last thing that happens in the movie is that this little boy at 10 years old makes this ethical decision that that he's done a bad thing. And he does a couple bad things during the movie, but he's always contrite about it later and always tries to fix it.
Pretty fast.
And pretty fast. Like he kind of knows. He's just, give him some credit, he's 10 years old, right? So he doesn't tell her right away that the war's over, but he really only lets that linger for, it might be minutes. I don't know how long it would have been played out in real life, but it wasn't a really long time. And because he's in love with her and he wants to keep her there, he looks through this book that he's drawn, and he has this picture of a rabbit in a cage. And there's a whole reason that the rabbit is part of this, but he sees the rabbit in the cage and he thinks about it. It's like, no, I need to let her know that the war's over. So he says, we need to do something brave. And he takes her outside, and they walk outside, and she can see that they're Americans and that like the war is over. And the first thing she does is decks him, right? Because he didn't tell her right away that the war was over. But she also, I think, understands. And she has said earlier in the film that the first thing that she'll do when she's liberated is dance. And so it ends up with this very sweet sort of dance with the two of them. And he's standing on the front steps, so he's about her height. And she's standing in the street, and they just start like with these little they're kind of looking at each other, and they do these little tiny moves, and it morphs into this dance, which I actually thought was oddly anachronistic. Like I don't think
it seemed awfully modern.
The dance moves that they were doing, I look a little bit more like Vogue than they do like Jerry Lee Lewis or something like that.
It looked very modern.
Yeah, but it was really sweet, and it was really cute, and it was just a great end for this movie.
Yeah. So there was
and they're playing Heroes in German, the German version of David Bowie's Heroes, which I thought, oh my God, not only a perfect film, but like a perfect song.
Yeah.
And if you know the words in English, we could be heroes just for one day. That both of them kind of had this like moment.
So actually, I might get choked up just thinking about that ending. It was one of the things JoJo Rabbit does exceptionally well is set up and payoff. So the song at the end, the fact that they're dancing, there were several times throughout the movie where it brought up dancing, and dancing in spite of fear, dancing in spite of the horror, and then it paid that off at the very end. Right. The song Heroes was a payoff to first the mom saying they did what they could.
Right.
There's a scene early on in the movie where JoJo and his mom see, I think 5 or 6 resistance people hung in the town square
which is a bit of foreshadowing.
Yeah. Which itself is a set of a payoff. Yeah. So, and then he asks the mom, what did they do? And she says what they could. They did what they could.
Which he doesn't understand.
Yeah.
He doesn't fully get it.
Yeah.
But he's starting to.
Yeah. There's that scene, and then one other scene. There's a scene where they're out just kind of on I guess we would call it a play date or something, where he's out with his mom, spending quality time with his mom, and there's a point where she's standing on kind of
like a
wall.
berm, like a wall.
Yeah,
it's
a
retaining
wall.
wall.
A retaining wall. That's what I was trying to come up with. So she's standing on a retaining wall, and you just see him at his level, and you just see her shoes.
These very particular
shoes. So her very particular shoes, a blue coat, her very particular pants, and then there's right after the scene with the Gestapo, where he's out wandering around. You see right behind him those shoes and those pants, and you know immediately the mother is hanging
right
behind him.
She's been hung in the square.
Yeah. So
with a tag on her, which tags her as a member of the German resistance.
Yeah. So that was such a gut punch.
Yeah. You didn't really see it coming, because you didn't know how. You didn't know how far down some of those roads this movie was going to go.
Yeah, well, it went there.
It went there.
It actually hit me harder the second time, knowing it was coming and being bracing for it the entire movie. But yeah, it was a pretty, and even though there were humorous moments throughout the rest of the movie, I never did recover from that.
Yeah,
it was just like so, and I think that was kind of the point was, when you breed monsters, when you teach people to hate other people, there are consequences for that, and those consequences are a 10-year-old kid staring at his dead mother.
Yeah, so. and even then, he has yet to fully reject the doctrine.
Yeah,
like he still has some sort of processing to do. But I think when he actually sees the war firsthand, he has that experience with his mother and stuff like that. There is a straight up a very clear rejection of Hitler and of his and that set of ideals. Yeah. So when we were talking the other night, I had mentioned a review I saw before seeing the movie, and this was from Grace Randolph at Beyond the Trailer, and there were a few things that she took issue with. So just want to kind of go through those real quick and kind of get our response to those. And I watch Grace Randolph. This is me trying to pick on her. I watch her all the time. Sometimes I agree with her, sometimes I don't on this particular one, but I always respect her opinion. On this particular one, I strongly disagree with her on some stuff. So there was a few real strong criticisms she had to this movie. One, we mentioned it earlier, is just in any way, shape, or form portraying Hitler and Nazis for laughs. For her, that was a bridge too far. It cannot be done. It should not ever be done. Your feelings? That's a tough one, and I respect that opinion. But I also think that, I think that there are very few things that you can't do, and I think as an artist there shouldn't be anything that's totally off the table, which means you're bound to the results of the art that you make. And in this case, Hitler in this movie wasn't Hitler. Hitler was an ego projection of this kid, and because Hitler was an ego projection of the kid, it actually allowed the movie to make fun of Hitler in a way that I think Hitler himself probably would have really hated. It gave voice to an insidious evil that was inside this kid's head, that was sort of parading as something that was much more innocent than it really was. Yeah, I think to be fair to Grace, what her point was, and I kind of agree with this, is that when you show, and it's actually kind of the thesis I talk about a lot in some of our podcast stuff, when you show monsters as anything other than monsters, it almost builds up a cultural immunity to it. So if you show the Manson family as silly and goofy, it minimizes the actual horror and trauma that they caused. Well, and I can kind of see that argument, but every once in a while, the counter argument to that would be, well, sometimes you just need to take the piss out of something to take its power away. a third of millennials at a recent poll um, didn't know what Auschwitz was.
Yikes.
Yes, 22% didn't know what the Holocaust was. And so, I mean, we're entering a time where it's been a while, right? And it needs to be remembered in maybe new ways, that, and maybe this is something that will get somebody to go and say, what was really going, were they really hiding Jews? Nobody was hiding Jews. It's like, yeah, people were hiding Jews, and there were, maybe it'll get somebody to go take a look. Maybe it'll get somebody to get interested enough to see what this is, and maybe that'll be somebody that down the road does something about it,
Yeah.
for something that might happen in the future. So, it was intended to be a bit uncomfortable,
Yeah, and it
maybe a
definitely,
lot uncomfortable.
yeah,
But I still think it was the right decision.
yeah, agreed. One of the other issues she brought up was the portrayal of gays, particularly Sam Rockwell's character, which was coded pretty heavily throughout the movie as gay, and then by the end of the movie, it was just full blown. He was doing everything but
A fabulous uniform.
Yeah,
And,
he was
and,
doing
my,
everything.
and eye makeup. And
He was doing everything but waving a rainbow flag
Right.
into battle.
And he almost kisses his sort of companion
Yeah.
in it at one point, and then sees people are noticing and they step back. So it wasn't intended to be, maybe. It
right.
was,
It was. Yeah. He would. So one of the things that could be pointed out is that gays were among the first group of people rounded up by the Nazis to be killed. So the idea of portraying Nazis or portraying gays as Nazis with the implication that they were rounding up other gays for extermination is problematic.
And also, I'm sure it happened.
Right, and that's kind of the point. And again, it goes back to that recurring theme of your inner self versus the outer self, and how monsters are produced. A lot of times, monsters are produced just for the sheer act of self-preservation.
One of the things with those characters too that's interesting. So there are, it takes two to make a gay couple. There's another character that he kind of has this relationship with that they don't really explore, but he's really kind of a dick for most of the movie. And then he sort of like, it's only sort of after we learn that he's gay that it opens up a door to the viewer a little bit, and he actually ends up saving the kid's life.
Yeah.
And sacrificing his own, when there was a moment where he probably could have gotten away, and instead he makes a big show of calling the 10-year-old kid a Jew, so that like they'll pull him out, and then all the other people, you hear the gunfire as they're being lined up and shot. So it actually portrays this one gay character as a ultimately, problematic in the beginning, but a very positive character to the end.
Yeah, he was definitely he was portrayed as a dick, but he was portrayed from the beginning as disillusioned.
Right.
I mean, he was a soldier, so he, there were references in the beginning about him wanting to be part of the war effort because he's a soldier, and that's his job, and I'm a soldier too. That's what we take pride in, being good at our job, even if our job is sometimes monstrous. You've learned real on that he was disillusioned and didn't buy the whole propaganda. He knew it was bullshit, but it was just a front that he had to maintain, because if he didn't, he probably would have been rounded up and killed himself.
And he actually saves the girl too.
Yeah,
he's the one character in the movie who saves two people.
Mm-hmm.
So as much of a monster as he may be, and as a lot of people are in a lot of different ways, he definitely has a couple moments of redemption.
Yeah. And speaking of the moment where he dies, that goes to one of the things that,
where you saw something that didn't happen in the movie when we first talked about it.
Yeah. Well, there's a going back to some of the criticism, in particular, I'm kind of bring up criticism like Grace Randolph had. She didn't appreciate the way that Americans were portrayed at the end of the movie. And I don't remember her saying specifically what she was referring to, but I thought she was referring to the moment where the Allies, the Russians and Americans had convened on this German town, and right after Sam Rockwell's character Captain K had saved JoJo, you hear off screen the gunshots of Captain K and his little group of Germans being executed. Even though they were POWs, they should not have been executed. They were clearly off screen, clearly executed off screen. I thought it was done by Americans, but it turns out on second viewing that Scott was actually right, and it was Russian
Like,
soldiers.
I thought I saw a red star on that guy's hat.
But it showed these Allied forces that were supposed to be liberators doing this monstrous thing. But I say it goes right back to that central theme of monsters. Germans weren't born as monsters. They were groomed to be that way by a particular ideology that took hold, coming out of World War One. And whether you're German or American or Russian or Japanese, anybody can be persuaded to follow that ideology and commit horrific acts.
Yeah, and the Rebel Wilson character, which is a funny character, but she is in the movie really the kind of prime example of that true believer who and it's good to have. It was good to have her in the film because she was the one sort of person. Like, everybody else seemed like they were disillusioned in some way, except maybe the Gestapo dudes.
Right.
But she was not, and she was all about it. And to the end, she's handing 10-year-olds guns and grenade launchers and saying, get out there, and strapping kids with explosives and telling them to go stand over next to the opposing forces. So
yeah. So the last criticism that Grace Randolph had was the way it was JoJo trying to take possession of Elsa. Now you had mentioned right before we came on, I haven't read the book, I don't know anything about the book, but you had mentioned that in the book this actually occurred halfway, the end of the war happened halfway through
it's
the book.
Apparently, I haven't read the book either, but apparently just via a little looking into it, it's a much darker, the book is much darker than the movie, which is hard to believe since the movie has Hitler in it. But yeah, it's in the book, the kid then endeavors to keep Elsa, because he has fallen in love with her, and then tries to get her to fall in love with him, and does not tell her that she can leave anytime.
Right.
I mean, she could physically overpower, and does, JoJo, but he keeps control of her apparently in the book by not telling her that the war is over, so that the minute she walked outside, she would be swept up and killed. And apparently in the book, that's no longer the case. And I think there are so many sort of examples in literature of like that sort of like somebody keeping somebody captive in different kinds of ways. And so apparently the book has a pretty strong element of that in it. And I don't know how the book resolves. I think in the book he probably lets her go, but I don't know that.
Well, all those people should have read the story about letting the injured bird go, and if it loves you, it'll come back to you.
Yeah,
everybody should read that story. But just going back to the movie though, there was that brief moment at the end where he tells her, she's like, "What's going on outside? Who won the war?" And he's like, "We did. It's not safe for you to go outside. You need to stay here. You need to stay here with me." And then he goes and looks at this book that he's been creating about this kid's book about how to identify a Jew.
There is one very funny part of the book too, which is this book that he's been making has pages and pages and pages of her boyfriend being killed.
Yeah.
In all kinds of crazy ways, like shot out of a cannon. It's really like, that was a laugh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then he sees a scene where he's standing in front of a cage that has a rabbit in it. Right. And I think this is another theme in the movie that just occurred to me. The more we try to imprison other people, the more we try to other others and imprison them, the more we end up imprisoning ourselves. Mm-hmm. And now that it occurred to me, there's actually a few references to that throughout the movie. So he has this realization that, he's trying to keep this thing that he loves captured, and it's going to end up keeping him in some form of bondage as well. So he ends up concocting a story. He could have just told her, "Hey, sorry, I was lying," but he concocted this story to heroically lead her outside, and she knew.
Yeah,
she knew what was going on. But
yeah, there's some social contracts in the movie between him and her that are designed because they're living in a horrendous situation. So he starts writing her letters from her boyfriend.
Yeah.
And the first letter that he writes, like, this is a point that's really funny, like really laugh out loud funny. The first letter that he writes is this letter about how her boyfriend doesn't love her anymore. He's breaking up with her. He's met a new girl. He's gotten very fat.
And he's not fighting the resistance. He's actually unemployed.
That's right. He's unemployed.
Yeah.
And because JoJo is trying to cast him in as like terrible, and then he hears and the girl knows, right, that JoJo wrote it, but she's crying, and then he's like, "Oh crap."
And we find out later that the biggest reason she's crying is that she knows that her boyfriend had already passed away.
Right. But then JoJo goes and writes another letter from the boyfriend again and he reads it, and it says like, "Oh no, I was just kidding. No, I still want to marry you. I didn't get fat.
Please don't kill yourself.
Please don't kill yourself." Right? Yeah. So many other women have killed themselves for me. It's really cute.
Yeah, and again, just going back to can't praise this movie enough for how it set something up and paid it off later.
Yeah, there's nothing that ends up just rolling around under the table that you go, well, they really didn't pay that off.
Yeah.
Even just people, even a quick scene of the Gestapo guys getting rounded up, just so you know they didn't get away.
Yeah.
And that's all you have to see. Doesn't have to be anything else.
Yeah, so any other thoughts, anything else that stands out in the movie, or themes or meanings?
It's just, what we were saying before, the thing that really jumps out to me about this movie is it's very, very difficult to categorize this movie. It has a lot of elements of a lot of different kinds of movies. And I was thinking about how, like our friend and fellow podcaster and sometime Bandwagon fan, Renee would talk about sort of structure in a short story or structure in a story. And I was thinking about this movie from the standpoint of structure, because it's not structured conventionally, and yet it's structured really well.
Yeah.
Like you said, it pays everything off, and it's just like, I mean, how can you say about a movie with Hitler in it that it's delightful? But I mean, it is a delightful, very sad, very, very human, like one of the most sort of human movies that I think I have seen in a really, really long time. Like a movie that just gets it.
So I want to come back to that statement that you just said. We'll wrap this up pretty soon, but I mentioned earlier, about 20 minutes ago or so, that there was 2 scenes in the movie that were shot like a horror scene, and the first one actually was pretty funny, because it was a scene where JoJo first encounters Elsa. And he discovers the secret door. He goes into it, and he has this moment of dread. Like you're going through the cavern. You think there's a monster at the end of it, and then at the end of this cavern is this what in his mind is the greatest monster in the world, a Jew.
Right.
And he screams. He runs out, and then there's this whole scene where it's the shot is this secret door that's now open, and you just see her hand come around the edge of the door, and then he runs downstairs, and then you see just her hand coming down the banister of the stairwell, and it was shot. It was like such obvious horror tropes.
Homage.
Yeah. Of and again, from his perspective, a Jew that he had never actually seen, didn't know what they looked like, but was the biggest monster that he could possibly imagine, and it was shot from that perspective. And then obviously we realize that no, she's then not long after that, there's the line where she says, what are Jews? He asks her what Jews are like, and she says, well, unlike you, we're human.
Right.
So, so that was a really funny, the really funny horror shot. But then going back to what you just said about just how human this movie was. So in the last couple weeks, I haven't done any videos about these yet. But in the last few weeks, there's 4 movies that I've seen. The Joker, well 5, but we'll skip Hustlers for now. Joker, Rambo, Last Blood.
Oh my God, you saw Rambo Last Blood?
Yeah. I did it.
Pray for your soul.
I did it as a favor to a friend. Rambo Last Blood, Harriet, which is a biopic about Harriet Tubman, and then JoJo Rabbit. And those 4 movies, two of them shred humanity. And then 2 of them celebrate humanity and caring about each other. And you couldn't come up with 4 movies that were where there was such a strong divide with the point of view between them. JoJo,
and then I saw the Lighthouse that'll just mess you up.
Yeah, I was thinking about seeing Lighthouse last night, but I ended up seeing Harriet Tubman instead. Or not Harriet Tubman, it's just called Harriet. Yeah. When I came out of JoJo, and as I was watching JoJo, and I said this to you when we came out, that movie made me hate the Joker even more. So the Joker was all about nihilism and about justifying your anger towards other people. And JoJo Rabbit was saying no matter what's going on, there's still reason that we're all human. We all share a humanity, and it celebrated that humanity, even to some extent rehabilitating Hitler.
Mm-hmm.
So, just kudos to this movie. Could not love JoJo Rabbit more.
Yeah, me either. I mean, it's definitely it's going to be like my litmus test. Am I still thinking about it a day later? Am I still thinking about it a couple days later? I think this is a movie that will inform a lot of watching movies for a really long time to come. So this one will really stick with me, and it's going to raise the bar even a little bit higher for some of the other, like, maybe, not so great stuff that's out there, and make it a little harder for me to
why can't every movie be the greatest movie I've ever seen? Why is it so hard?
Yeah. And it's okay for a movie to just be sort of entertainment pablum. I'm sure Last Blood, well, I haven't seen it, but it was probably fun to watch.
I did not hate it.
Okay. I mean, that's
yeah.
Even Joker. I mean, we're going off on a little tangent now, but even Joker. Like, I enjoyed watching Joker. I had a good time in the movie. It was beautiful. It was interesting. The story held together really well. I just walked out of it, and it was like socially not a redeemable concept.
Yeah.
JoJo Rabbit, socially redeemable concepts at every turn.
Yeah. So just to kind of put a button on this, when we were talking about Joker on our podcast. Now I'm actually calling it a podcast.
It's kind of a podcast.
So in talking about the Joker, I brought up for Dead Poet Society, for anybody that remembers that movie, the J. Evans Pritchard scale of how to determine the greatness of a poem, and it had how artfully something was done versus how important it was. Joker, I rated incredibly high on how artfully it was done. It was a beautiful movie.
Beautiful.
I gave it a negative score for the importance of it because I think it was actually harmful to culture and society. JoJo Rabbit is off the charts on both scales. It was so brilliantly. It was just as beautiful as Joker was.
And much more simple in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
I mean, it was there was a certain kind of simplicity to it.
Yeah. There's a couple shots, just a couple shots I want to celebrate. There's a scene early on in the movie where all the kids are at this Hitler youth camp and they're throwing books into a fire. And then it cuts to all their tents lit up on the ground as the embers of the fire floating in front of the screen. It was, regardless of what the implications of that scene were, that was a beautiful, beautiful shot. And like, I want to go photograph something like that right now.
Right. Yeah. I'm
actually considering like throwing glitter in my pool, which I know I'll immediately regret if I
you will
do
so
that.
regret that.
To get something like that. And then there's the scene where him and his mom are talking by the river, and they're down in the lower left 6 of the frame, and just a staircase this beautiful staircase that goes up from left to right, bottom to top, and it was just such a beautifully composed shot.
Yeah.
So
and sad too, because the mom was talking about how lovers used to like hang out there, and there's nobody like that now, which also has implications for the fact that his dad's not around. I mean, there's like the words in this movie carry quite a bit of weight. The
words carry a lot of weight, and they match the cinematography. Yeah. Everything melds together. It is a movie that's worth. I know you have a rule against watching movies twice. You should try watching this one twice.
Yeah, I might go back and see this one.
Yeah, or at least I'll let you borrow the DVD because I'll definitely be buying it.
There you go.
Or the Blu-ray. Anyways, so we've been yammering on for a while. Beers, blowhards with beer. That's what we could be calling ourselves.
Yeah. Go see it.
Yeah, definitely.
Just go see it.
Go support this movie. It should be making all the money in the world, and it won't. So. And
if you liked What We Do in the Shadows, you'll love this. Like, What We Do in the Shadows was kind of fun, and this, to me, is the evolution of a filmmaker that is like, I mean, and this is a young guy.
Yeah.
So there is so much more ahead, and I know he's part of your sort of Marvel universe.
He did. My fourth favorite Marvel movie was Thor Ragnarok, and I
love it that you have them all categorized by.
Yeah. And then he's in his. I don't know if it'll be his very next movie, but the next Marvel project he has is Thor: Love and Thunder, which to you probably sounds like
Love and Thunder. That sounds like a southern rock group.
Yeah, so it's probably
Leonard Skinner and Love and Thunder.
Yeah, I can totally picture like a heavy metal cover.
Right.
So
what were the guitars that were like the V shaped? You definitely need a couple of those.
Yeah. But I'm excited to see it. I'm going to go back and start watching some of his earlier films because I think he's great.
Clearly a man with some soul.
Yes. So that was that's it. That's our discussion of JoJo Rabbit. So this again, I'm gonna try to do. I'm gonna scale it back somewhat. Well, I'm gonna scale back from what I tried at the beginning of 2019, where I was trying to do 2 movies a week. And then I went to none for quite some time, but I am going to get back and try to do one video a week. So that'll be my goal for the rest of the year. Or you can also catch us at the What WT Popcast on Twitter, What on Spotify, Anchor FM,
eventually
iTunes.
And What is like this but different.
It's
Yeah. I mean, it's the same guys with weird ideas about things.
And Renee.
And by Renee. Guys, I'm being inclusive.
Yeah.
It's the same group of people with, weird ideas about things. But but we sort of approach it, some of the stuff in a different... You probably get glimpses of it from like a discussion like this, but that's really what we're more trying to get under the skin.
Right. Trying to get under the surface.
Trying
not to get... Hopefully we don't get...
we don't want to get under your skin.
Out of the 3 of us, I'm probably the one that will get under your skin the most. I definitely get under Renee's skin the most.
Yeah.
You're like, no question about that.
Yeah, no question.
So but anyways, thanks for listening. This is Jeff.
Scott.
Get on the bandwagon.